The first question comes from Jan, and she's wondering about wood duck bills. And you know what might be kind of fun is for us to also throw into this package, should you be taking up the challenge of drawing wood ducks, wood duck heads have these crazy patterns on them and then iridescence on top of that pattern. And so let's just take a look at first carving and shaping the wood duck head. And then how can you get sort of a sense of iridescence in the feathers on the side of the wood duck head, right? Does that sound like fun to people? We got some thumbs up. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna switch over to the video camera here, and we're gonna take a look at drawing a wood duck head, and we are then going to drop into that a little bit of iridescence and how do you kind of work with the really complex patterns on the head of the wood duck. So my usual strategy for drawing, I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. All right, and people suggested that that we, let's see, there's a way of hitting this. All right, so be sure to turn off your microphone if you are sort of just sort of joined our meeting. So wood duck heads, wood duck bills are very small bills, and they kind of, they come down at an angle from the forehead. So they're ducks with a very steep forehead angle. So this angle is going to be different on different duck species. They have a small, cute bill. It gives them this really sort of petite face. And the bill hooks up into the face with a rather large section of forehead that is sort of between, on the edge of the bill here. So I'm going to have bill that comes up in here, straight. The bottom of the bill is, I'm going to have that actually kind of come up at a slight angle, and then down for our wood duck throat. On the tip of the bill, ducks have what they call the nail. So it's this little tab that sticks off, and then the bill is going to hook in there. So the nail dips down above the front there. So there is a zone. What I usually do when there's sort of complex patterns on things, I just sort of draw light lines around the edges of those things. So for instance, the wood duck has up in here in this part of its face a little yellow zone. There is a white zone, and then there is a red zone off in here. So I've just put some little lines around the edges of those different spots. The nostril is, so I'm going to get my forehead to kind of come in a little bit further here. The nostril is pretty far forward on the head of a wood duck. And I also starting to draw it too low there. I'm going to put it up here. So I'm going to have a little bill that's going to come down, tip. And so now I'm going to try to put the rest of the features into the head of this bird. The distance between the eye and the beak here is an area that you really want to tune into. The distance between the eye and the back of the head can change depending on how the bird fluffs its head up. But the distance between the eye and the front of the bill is not going to change. So on your duck head, that is something to really look out for. I put a little ring of tissue around the eye here. Now I'm going to build up the rest of my duck head. I'm paying attention to how far up I want to kind of come, how far back here. I often will, as I'm blocking things in, I will make my lines fairly square and angular. Later on, I can come by and round around those corners. But when I'm initially carving something in, I usually think really in terms of straight lines and angles so that I get the inflection points on whatever it is that I'm drawing. This duck, actually I need this, do I need the head to come back further? I think I do. I can use something like this distance here as a measuring tool. So let's say if this is 1, I'm going to have 1, 2, about 1, 2. No, this is about right. This is about right.
It's giant.
Hey, Jack, there was a question that when people are drawing birds or ducks, and if they're having trouble getting the proportions, how do you're kind of doing this as you go, but how do you check to make sure that, you're getting those proportions down correctly before you start to render?
That's a really good question, because I think we've all had the experience, like you're ready to go, you're just so excited about dropping into the rest of the drawing that you haven't really realized that, you're not stopping to check and sort of change things. Actually, for instance, I want to change this guy's bill. I want to make it a little bit shorter. How did I kind of know that I wanted to make this one's bill shorter? It was, in this case, it was just sort of eyeballing it. But my general kind of eyeballing procedure is I have a few kind of general things that I'll do. One is you can use some feature and then look at that as a ruler. So for instance, on this duck, the distance between the eye, maybe the middle of the eye, or the front of the eye here to here, that's going to be a unit of 1. And on the photograph that I'm looking at, it should be a little bit more than a unit of 1 here, and about 3 of them coming back here. So actually this head wants to come back a little bit further. Right? So you can use some measurement as your kind of standard duck unit. Now that, of course, is easy when you're looking at a photograph because it's staying still and you can kind of keep coming back to that little point of measurement. But when you are doing things out in the field, it is really, really hard to do that. So instead, what I do when I'm sketching things out in the field is I will kind of go by what I call the kind of the cuteness meter, the cuteness test. Your sense of what is cute and what is not cute is actually a matter of proportions. If you see some critter out there and it has big eyes and a little body, right? We go, oh, look at that cute little guy, right? Big heads and big eyes proportionally are neonatal features. Babies have them. And so when we see that, we go, oh, it's really cute. But if something has a small head and small eyes, right, that's not cute. So when I'm drawing a bird, let's see, outside my window, there is a chickadee at the feeder. And I start to kind of put down my chickadee. What I'm doing is I'm looking at how big is this head compared to the body. And I'm thinking about that in terms of cuteness. Is that cute enough? All right. Or do I want to make it cuter? Ah, it just got cuter. Just made the head bigger. Now it's looking about sort of chickadee cuteness level. Right? See, if I have a chickadee that's built on this frame, it's going to end up being a cute little bird. But, so I'm just going to kind of put in a few features. Make it sort of start to look a little bit more like All right. So that's going to be a cute little birdie. But if I get in there and I start trimming the head, so look at this. If I make this head smaller, a lot of that cuteness just went away. Similarly, if I make the eyes smaller, right, now we might be sort of getting more some Junko proportions. Sorry, I did not silence my phone before this workshop started. So I could put all of the chickadee features on this Junko proportioned head that I want, and it's not going to feel right. It's going to feel like a it's going to feel like a just sort of some weird hybrid. So keep an eye open. I'm now going to turn this into sort of a more formal Junko. All right. So that kind of cutimeter is a useful thing. A good way to kind of develop this also is to find some bird that is really common in your backyard. If there are a lot of Juncos, draw lots and lots and lots of Juncos. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get an idea in your head of sort of standard proportions that are good for a Junco. And that Junco then becomes the measuring stick against which you can see everything else. So a Junco, when you see a bird that has a larger head than a Junco, you go like, wow, it has a really large head compared to your sort of standard bird unit, your SBU. So your basic bird unit for you then is a Junco because you have drawn a whole bunch of Juncos, right? Or whatever bird, like if it's brewer's blackbirds that are really common in your backyard, then it's brewer's blackbirds. Or house finches, whatever it is, get to know that thing really well, and then you'll have something to compare everyone else against. But at the start, all birds are just going to look medium because you don't have some sort of basic, sort of standard measurement unit. So that's how I would approach that. Get to know, like for instance, with ducks, get to know the mallard really, really well and draw a bunch of mallards. And then when you look at a bird and you go like, wow, that bird's beak is much smaller than a mallard. That's really cool. Then you're well ahead of the curve. All right. So my wood, kind of just jumping back, Brian, did that answer the question? I hope. So the wood ducks have a bunch of white lines kind of going over their head, and they have a really neat little mask. Has kind of a double scallopy thing under the throat. Really beautiful, beautiful patterns on a wood duck. But challenging to draw. I think I want to make this guy's head even a little bit larger because they just have, you really kind of get this proud forehead look on a wood duck. On the outside edge of this line here, I'm going to put in what I call the Bill Berry marks, little kind of flicks in like that just kind of make it look a little bit shaggy as you kind of go around that curve there. And in just a moment, I'm going to turn this region into a bunch of iridescent feathers. And iridescence is scary to draw for a lot of people because just as birds will change their positions when they draw, iridescence changes color dramatically as you sort of shift it around and look at different light angles.
Hey, Jack.
Yes.
Could you please zoom out just a little bit? Several people are writing in that the whole image, they can't see the whole image. Thanks. Awesome.
Is that better?
Yes, indeed.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the tip. I'm unable to kind of watch the chat and draw at the same time, so I appreciate kind of the call in to let me know that. So I want to trim this here. There we go. The straight lines are really my friends. I love the kind of the part of a drawing where I feel like an architect carving parts of my bird. All right. So now I'm going to throw some iridescence on the side of this head. Now that's a bold move to do in a public demonstration because it could go south. But I'm going to show you how I would go about it. With iridescent feathers, depending on the angle, sometimes you'll see purples, sometimes you'll see gold, sometimes you'll see greens, all reflecting back at you at different places. And as you change your head position relative to the bird and the sun, all those colors will change. So if you find a mallard out of the water, the best thing to do to understand this is to walk around that mallard in a large circle. And as you go around, if the sun is here where my finger is, and you're over here, you're looking at the mallard where the eye is, you're looking at the mallard, you see a green mallard. And then you walk around here so that you are at right angles with the sun. Sun rays coming in like this. So at right angles, you look over at the mallard and it has a blue head. And then you walk around so that the sun is behind you looking back at the mallard's head. It has a purple head. So as you circumnavigate the mallard, right, you'll see that head change all these different colors. It's really a fascinating thing to do. So next time you are out at a city park and there is a cooperative mallard out of the water, you'll know just what to do. And then nature journal, diagram that little, imagine a little sketch with kind of a clock of mallard heads. That's kind of a fun little exercise to do. But I'm going to draw some iridescence in on this head, and we're going to be looking at it from an angle where we're going to be seeing a few purples coming in, some greens and some yellow greens. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly map the zones. In this area, I'm going to put, see that little P? That's my P for purple. I'm going to have some P for purple up in here. And I'm going to get a zone of yellow-green up in there. So I've just, most of the head is going to be green. Actually, I'm going to throw in a little bit of yellow-green in here too. So I've got a matrix of green, some purple in here, some purple in here, and some yellow-green in those two spots. You don't want to be kind of trying to map that out when you have wet paint in front of you, because there'll be too much to handle all at once. So I'm going to move the duck over here. You can see that what I've got, I've just pulled out a paint palette, and maybe what I'll do is try to get the paint palette in the picture as well, so that I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'll zoom out a little bit more so that you can see, kind of watch the paint mixing action. But I do want to make sure that everybody saw that I've already mapped in with these little P's and Y's where the yellow greens are, where the greens are. And these will be white lines that go through here and here. If I accidentally blop into these, initially I'm going to try to leave these white areas clean with just white paper. But I may come back at the end of the drawing and drop some white paint into those. You could also use a white pen, a little white marker. All right, but notice that there's that map. Minus. All right.
Are you using a Prismacolor at this point to do this?
That's great. That's a good question. Yeah, this is a Prismacolor Indigo Blue pencil. I just like the, I think my favorite pencil, Prismacolor pencil to do general sketching with is the Prismacolor Black Grape pen. That's a really useful one. And but in this case, I have I've done it with this blue one, which also just kind of, it's fun to have just a different color down there. But if you are going to do most of your sketching just with one pencil, I recommend that black grape one. So let's look at how we're going to do this. I'm going to first mix up some yellow green. Notice that in my mixing area here, there's a glob of yellow right in here, right? You don't want to take a brush tip with green on it and bring it up here into your yellow. So squeeze a bit of yellow into the green part of your page. Right? Now I'm going to mix that with some yellow greens, and there's a reasonable yellow green, right? And I am going to brush that across the top of the head in here. And where else did I have? I had some yellow green down. I want that to be a little bit yellower. Test. And then I have some purple. And what do I think about that? I want it to be a little bit more, I'm going to mix a little bit of magenta into that to make it a little, I like that better, right? And I'm going to brush this across here. I'm not letting this really get wet and soupy. Notice that that's fairly dry on my brush here.
People particularly like the watercolor demonstration. There was a question about how you use cyan and magenta in watercolor. Sort of the simple role that those play. So it's good to see that you're using a magenta right at the
I brought
moment.
in my magenta here. Anytime I'm tweaking a color, I usually reach for my cyan or my magenta because if those are more of the more pure, the closest thing to sort of pure mixing pigments that we have. If you're mixing with blue or you're mixing with red, red is actually a mixture already of magenta and yellow. So you can actually make red by mixing magenta and yellow together. And contrary to what's said in sort of a number of misleading places. If I do my mixing with those colors, I'm going to get sort of muted, muddy colors. All right. Now I'm checking this green, and I'm liking that green. I'm going to bring that green up in here, and I'm going to sort of kind of feather that into that edge there. And there's going to be kind of a weird stage in this drawing where you're going to be saying to yourself, but wait a minute, that doesn't really look iridescent. And I'm going to agree with you yet, but there's a stage at the end where the magic really happens, and we're not there yet. So just bear with me. And I'm pulling my green across here. Finally into here. Right now, it looks kind of calico, right? It looks like there are kind of patches of purple, patches of yellow-green. It doesn't look like those colors are really blending into each other, and I agree. Don't worry, we're going to be dealing with that in a moment. There's two things that are going on. One is the color change, and we're getting that. The other thing that's really kind of critical about getting the sort of the sense of iridescence is that when iridescent feathers are not being iridescent and glowy and showy, they're turned off. They are not reflecting color back to you. So there are also big places in an iridescent thing where you are going to see the color go to black. And so here's my map. Actually, I'm going to put one more thing in. I'm going to mix up a little bit of cyan here. See, that's cyan. And make kind of a blue-green. And I'm going to put in just a little bit of blue-green. I think I want more cyan. Put a little bit of cyan in here. Because that's what I'm seeing on a reference photo that I'm looking at. By the way, I am doing this from a reference photo. I just did search for wood duck online, and this one came up, and so I'm working from that. But let's agree that this doesn't look iridescent. I'm going to zoom in on it, and at this point, you're saying I don't like drawing iridescent things. It looks like I've got blotches of color, and that's not really satisfying. I'm going to do a little bit of color smoothing here with a wet, sort of a damp brush. Get some of these edges just to be a little bit more smooth. All right, and now I'm going to do something really cool. Remember how I said that iridescent feathers, when you are not, when they're not getting the light, they are going to black. That's where we're going to go here. And it's scary to do at first, but it's, you just got to trust that it's going to work. And if it doesn't, then you just do another picture. But I am going to zoom out. All right, I'm going to drop some really dark value into parts of these feathers. And so what you're going to see is it's going to go from being light colored with vibrant color into, bam, black. And with a very, very minimal transition between that. So the color will be on or the color will be off. And the result will be is that it's going to look, this sort of calico thing will start to look like iridescence. Now, there's a couple of choices that I can use for my black on that. This is on my palette. This is neutral tint. I'll show you how that looks. Right, it's black. This is Payne's gray, which is a bluish black. All right, very nice kind of bluish black. Let's zoom in on those little swatches. Where are they? Oh, there they are. So this is sort of a more bluish, right? But there's a couple of other colors that I have in my palette. See, here's my green mixing area. And the edge of my green and blue mixing area are these two little dark tabs. This one here that looks black, and I put that down here. Whoops, I put that down here. See that thing that looks black? That's actually a really, really dark green. That's called perylene green. And it goes to an almost black value. So that could be a really easy thing to pull in here. The other thing that I could do is I could do that. Yes, Valerie, what was that? I'm sorry, there was a question that was just coming in?
No, I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh, no worries, no problem. But check this out, black, right? But no, it's actually blue. It's an indanthrone blue. But see how black that goes? Both of those go to a super dark value. And I can put that in on my iridescent drawing. And that, I can use those instead of using black. So here, I'm going to, what will I do? I'm going to go for, let's pull this over here, pull this over here. Let's use some of the perylene green right here. All right, so I mix some onto my brush, using a water brush here, and I get that liquefied over here. I test it over here. I think I want it a little bit thicker. So I'm going to give a few more streaks here. I don't just put paint on my brush and go painting over here, because then there are going to be globs of sort of unmixed, heavier paint and stuff kind of hiding in this brush tip. I bring it down onto the palette and take it for a little spin on the palette, this little spin there. That smooths that area of paint out, and that's what I'm getting in there. So, all right, so now I'm going to come back one step in to this guy, and I'm going to start to paint this black but green mixture here on my duck's forehead. And I'm using little strokes in the direction of the feathers. If any of these show up, they are going to feel like they are just little kind of feathered, gives you that sort of feathered edge. I'm also going to have just loaded my brush with a little bit more paint from that pool that I made. I'm going to do the same thing back here. This part I can have just be dark. And somewhere in this area here, it's going to make this transition. So I'm just using my brush tip lightly, kind of getting some streaks. And I'm going to throw in a little bit of indanthrone blue just to really kick that back to dark. And it's scary when you first start, putting the dark on top, because when you're doing light washes and layers, you can always make those darker, but this is kind of a bit more of an unforgiving part of the process, although you can lift a little bit of this out. All right, I'm going to add more dark into here, and then right here in front of my eye, I'm going to do the same thing. This part's going to go dark. And kind of feather that edge. You see how when you get that bright right next to the light color, that often really starts to look like there's something iridescent happening right in that area.
Dia, please come here.
Are you adding the darks based on the photo reference,
yes,
or
yes,
are you using it based on?
So I've got a photograph of a duck here, and I'm just sort of where I'm seeing dark on that photograph. I'm believing it and putting it in. Sorry for my big hand in kind of the way of the camera there. This will be a big fun part. Whee. All dark.
That's so scary.
I know. You're absolutely right. It is. You know. This is the point where you kind of like. You know. You've drawn your hummingbird, and now you're going to start to paint black on top of that gorget. Really, your brain knows that. Like, oh, I want it to look bright and sparkly. It's going to be red, right? But no. I'm actually going to be painting black right over that. You're right. It is scary, and you just have to kind of hope. Now, I am going to soften the edges of some of these just a little bit. So I've got a clean brush. I've taken my brush, got a clean brush, right? And so I can just bring my brush right into these areas. It'll pick up a little bit of that black and just make that a little bit of a smoother transition.
Hey, you, I'm just.
Was that a question?
Are you using watercolor paper, or is this a sketchbook?
This is regular sketchbook paper, lightweight sketchy book paper. So if you do this on real watercolor paper, it will take this kind of abuse much better. Now I'm going to build up some color back into this part. Oops. I should test my colors before I hit them down on the paper. I'll put a little bit more color into here. And I'm going to bring clean brush, goes into yellow, never a dirty brush into yellow. I'm going to bring a little bit of yellow into here. Oh, look at that. Oh, I am so sorry. I am so sorry, everybody. Modeling bad behavior. Yellow in my green. My daughters, if I did that in front of them, they'd be like, oh, Daddy, you said we never do that. Gotta clean that up before they see it.
When you clean your water brush, or you just rubbing on a napkin nearby?
Yeah, because I've got, well, actually what I've got here is this is an old sock. Let me zoom back. So I have, when I'm sketching in the field, I'm holding my palette like this with this hand, and I've got my sock here. So I will squeeze and clean, right? Like that. And then I will go into here to paint and squeeze here. So it's just an old sock on my wrist. So what to do with those little dryer orphans. And that way you don't have one more thing kind of lying around. But when I'm in the studio here, I sometimes will, I'll just take that and just have it by my side. You could also use, you know, an old paper towel, a napkin, or something like that. Any of those sorts of things would work. Oops, no. Don't put purple into your green or it'll turn that part muddy brown. See, that just sort of brown that up like that.
Are you just sticking with one dark color, right? Rather than working with Perylene green or Indian throat blue or any variations?
I can actually just bob back and forth between them. I could just stick with one, but I think it's just kind of fun to have a variety of those in there. Here into some of this dark area, I'm going to just throw in some Indathrone blue right in there just to push this all the way to black, right? And so that gives you a little bit of a sense of iridescence. There's a tendency, as I'm starting to do, then just to keep messing around with it and messing around with it and messing around with it until the whole thing becomes so muddy that you kill it. So I'm going to just let this stop here and stick a fork in it and call it done. One last thing I could do with it if I wanted to, if I felt that it did get a little bit too dull, I could let this entire thing dry and then come back in with a little bit of colored pencil in here and just drop in a few little highlights of purple, a few highlights of yellow green here and there, and that would kind of make that thing sparkle. We may kind of come back to this drawing. Oh, here, what we'll do is we'll speed up time. So for drawing your paint, if you want real-time time lapse, and we'll throw some colored pencil at it. So I'm going to zoom in on it again. Boom, 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 boom. I'm going to just get a little bit of a bright yellowy green and a little bit of a purple and a blue-green, and a brighter purple. And I like to kind of keep my pencils in little clusters by kind of hue. And ooh, it's kind of a bluey green. I'm not seeing anybody there. Is there more of a bluey green in here? Not quite. Let's go back to the blues. And
do you mostly use colored pencil in your studio, or do you sometimes take them into the field with you?
I have a very small set of colored pencils that I'll throw into my field kit. That's not what I want. This guy's a little bit closer. But for the big set here, that is the big set is is studio only. So I've just sharpened the pencil, and now I'm just going to spin the tip of it like this a little bit. That's going to help the tip of it not snap and break as I start to draw. Have you ever sharpened a pencil and you start to draw with it and immediately the tip goes and the tip breaks off? That's because there's not a sort of smooth, more beveled tip. So if I do this, I'm going to really reduce that kind of effect. I'm going to test this to make sure, yeah, sort of light. And I'm going to put in a few little That's not really showing up at all. um,
There's a question about the pencil sharpener that you're using in your studio.
I have a Boss Stitch Quiet Sharp, big kind of chunky. Actually, let's see if we can zoom out. And this is, I'm sorry if anybody gets seasick, if you kind of get, whoa, there's Bob Ross. Hey, everybody say hi to Bob. There it is. Whoa, it's upside down. Hey, whoa, now back to Bob. Hey, hello, Bob. And yes, those were the Bob Ross Happy Little Tree Mints. So yeah, just a few little flicks of this in here. I'm gonna zoom more, zoom in.
Are they actually shaped like trees?
Oh, you gotta check this out. Didn't your life just get better?
God.
Isn't that fun, Emily?
Oh, fun.
Life just got better. Life's better with Bob. Little hint of some iridescence going in there. Now let's see, is this going to be too dark? Yes, see, it's good to test these. I want this to be a few little highlighty marks, so that pencil that I chose is not going to make me happy. Let's see if that will work. Nah, I don't like that. So I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. And I wanted to see if I could put in a little bit of sharpen. This guy just beveled it. See, if there's a little imperfection in the tip, as you start to draw, pressure will be uneven at the very tip of this, and that's what's going to make the kind of premature snap, snap. All right, so I'm going to put in a little bit of, nope, sorry. Of blues right in there.
Sorry, what blue is that you're using?
This one here is, this is the aquamarine. It's a barrel Prismacolor pencil. It's a little aquamarine pencil.
Oh, got it, thanks.
And now we kind of get a, you know, a sense of iridescence on the head. And kind of looks a little bit raggedy when we're zoomed in this close. I'm going to zoom back out because distance makes everything pretty, right? But there we go. That's kind of how I might suggest that you can get, you kind of play with these effects and play with iridescence. So we put a small beak onto the side of our duck. We've got a very steep bill. I think that was original question, but then we took it kind of from there and did a little extension looking at how would you suggest iridescence? And wow, it looks like we've got 3 minutes for the next question. Were there any other questions?
Do you make the bill
There were several.
yellow bill?
Please repeat the question about the bill.
Is the yellow bill yellow color?
Oh, so the bill has different colors on different sections. Maybe just to kind of wrap up this the billing here. my water brush. We'll see how far I can get with a water brush that's almost out of water. So the bill of this has a yellow section, it has a red section, and it has a black and white section. So I'm going to have up near, we'll zoom in one more time, plus. Up near the top edge.
There are a couple.
What?
Sorry, Jack. There are a couple questions you might be able to address while you're painting. A couple folks were interested in how they get younger children involved, either through homeschooling or, in one case, it's grandchildren who are farther away. How do you get them engaged and interested and start getting them curious and to actually build a practice around nature journaling?
That's a really, really important question. I would say that sort of first thing is that your own example is key. What you do, they say, you know, kids don't listen to a thing you say, but they watch everything you do. So if you are nature journaling, and that's the norm, they're going to want to do the same thing. If you don't really have it as a practice, and then you bust it out like as this is something, you know, they're already getting all this stuff that they're being told to do, like, you know, go do this homework, and they don't see grown-ups doing that homework. So when my daughters are practicing their letters and their writing, I've got a little notebook where I go out and I sit with them and I practice making my letters. And so they see that, and kids really respond well to that kind of authentic, you know, this is important enough to me that I am doing this. So also making the tools and equipment accessible to them. If a kid expresses interest and they like your brush, the next time you see them, you say, I've got something special for you, and you sit down with them and you give them their little kit with their brush, and you teach them about not getting the green over in the yellow, like I just did, and you have to kind of wash it out. So your example is huge. Another thing that helps is for them to sort of see that skills are built by, you know, progressively, you know, building up, so that if they have a journal and they're able to draw in it on a regular basis, then you'll be able to flip to the front and say, like, look where we were just 1 year ago. Look at, showing what are things where you've really developed and changed, and they'll be able to see that. So researchers call this idea the growth mindset. And when you're teaching kids growth mindset, you're showing them the impact that work has, and the impact that repetition has on developing any skill. And that makes a big, big, big difference. So you're role modeling it. Make time for it. When you go out as a family, you can do it together. And there are times also with my children that actually I'm going to just switch back to the, you can look at Jack view, or should we stay on duckness? You want to stay on duck? Yeah, but duck is prettier than me. But, oops, wrong way. I completely lost my train of thought. Where was that locomotive going? We were talking
We were
about
all
family inspired
talking
Growth.
about.
growth mindset. Yes, thank you.
Learning by repetition and example.
Yes, exactly. So so that there are also times where I say like, oh no, this is like I kind of walk a line between no, this is actually what we're doing now, and this is an important skill for you to learn, and inspiring them to be self-motivated. So there are times where I just kind of give the push of no, actually this is just what we're doing right now as a family. Right now it's journaling time, so let's grab our things, and I'll go show them some skill. And yesterday they wanted to be inside and sitting like lumps, and I kind of said like, no, this is weather time. They had done some stuff in their school classrooms on understanding weather, and so we went out and I sort of made us all three go out and sit on our neighbor's grass, and we looked at the sky, we drew the sky, we took notes about the sky, and by the time they were done, they thought it was really cool. They learned about the Beaufort wind scale. I got out a little a wind meter, and they got to figure out how these things work, and we did. There was a lot of cool stuff, but it took a little bit of kind of initial push of like, actually no, this is what we're doing right now. So it's a balance between giving structure to activities, building skills, inspiring them to do stuff on their own. Amelia the other day, we had this moldy orange, and she said, I know what we do. We draw this thing now, and then we draw it later. So we have this new pet, this molding orange, that and we woke up this morning, and the kids, first thing, they ran to the molding orange to go see what it was doing, and they squealed with excitement about kind of the wonder that was there in front of them. It was really, really cool. It was a great little rotting orange moment. So those are different things you're balanced. Sometimes I push it. Sometimes I let them initiate it. We build skills. I reinforce growth mindset. The new book, How to Teach Nature Journaling, by myself and Emily Ligren, with a wonderful foreword by Amy Tan. You can buy that on my store. You can also get a free download of that right off my website. Thank you, Heyday Books, for making that accessible and possible. But while we're kind of on this sort of topic, and we are kind of coming to a close here. If at this time it's possible to make a donation to support me doing this work, I greatly appreciate that. And please do so. You can do that directly on my website. If that doesn't work financially for you and your family at this time, please find other ways of acts of kindness and service in our community, whether that's donating blood or helping a neighbor who's elderly with their groceries and going to the store for them. There are a lot of ways which we can reach out as a community. But I really want to encourage people let's not go in at this time, let's go out and connect with other people. I also want to send my respect and appreciation to Brian Higginbotham for his help in monitoring this class and workshop. I'm going to be here every Tuesday with another open session where we'll find some subject that's of interesting to somebody that probably will kind of riff off of the first things that come up. We may not get to some of the ones further down the line, although I will inspect the chat.